So, as some concluding thoughts to the semester, I want to share 10 insights from this class that I think are relevant to your career, whatever it is going to be. And these are kind of in rough chronological order of relating to modules from this class. So, first of all, kind of relating to the first couple of modules about anthropology as a whole, is know that we are all of us, weird. So, there's a. What I mean by weird is we're all people that could seem unusual outside of our context. Like in that Nagarima reading, which was really about 1950s America, taken out of context, we can all seem bizarre, strange, or nonsensical. So understand that and bear that in mind when you're encountering other people and other groups of people. Number two, know that groups' cultures make sense even when they don't. So what I'm trying to get at there is that very often when you're dealing with groups of people or with individual people who are clearly kind of pulling from a group tradition, understand that a lot of times people feel like their own behaviors and attitudes as a group or as an individual make sense, and they do make sense in a certain context and certain assumptions, even if they maybe don't make sense in other contexts, or even if some of the beliefs and ideas are contradictory to themselves. Also, back to number one, in the sense that we're all weird, understand that sort of your individual slice, most likely of American and more specifically sort of Alaskan social life or wherever you've moved around in the country, is just one slice of the overall human picture. And in some regards, a very unusual one when we look at the long-term perspective of all human time and then the big perspective of all human cultures. The specific little space that we inhabit is a pretty strange one in a lot of different ways. So just understand that and bring that to bear, especially when you're assessing cultural differences. I watched this terrible reality TV show, and I will blame this on my wife, but it's called 90 Day Fiance. It involves people, in theory, getting married to each other from different countries after long-distance relationships. And I'm constantly blown away by the cultural ignorance that is on display in that show. Typically, if I can be blunt, from the American spouse to the spouse from another country, although sometimes the other direction as well, for sure. But the degree to which people just don't even ask sort of basic questions about, are my assumptions about marriage, are my assumptions about romance, are my assumptions about gender, are they really universal, or is this reflective of where I grew up? That's important. Number three is know how to get more information and how not to, right? Ethnography, the idea of interviewing people and participant observation that we use as cultural anthropologists and linguists, that is not something that is only for anthropologists, but is something you should do in a more informal level when you need to better understand the people around you. As I say, if a person confuses you, go ahead and interview. At the same time, know how not to get information, and what I mean by that is understand, and this is part of like with the archaeology when they were talking about sort of the complex relationships in the textbook between archaeology and indigenous peoples, understand that sometimes when you're talking about somebody's background or heritage and like kind of prying into their background, that may not always be entirely comfortable and may not be their job to explain their culture to you. So understand when it's appropriate to, try to get more information and how that can help you be a better person, and also understand when to just let something sit and not necessarily need to pry for information or maybe go to other sources to get that information. But don't be like the people in the race lecture when we talked about sort of 1800 scientists who assumed they knew about race, but really were just sort of basing it off their own racism. Go ahead and not trust misconceptions and stereotypes. Those are very often inaccurate. Number four, kind of drawing on those lectures about human evolution, is know that your body naturally is kind of a scrappy omnivore with a lot of hunting into it. Now, we've been evolving for the last few thousand years in a farming direction, but we've still got a lot of human history of sort of this like huntingness to us, in some groups more recently than others for sure. So know that your body wants physical activity, know that your body wants lots of different kinds of food, and treat it respectfully. Number five is recognize, back to the archaeology lectures, recognize the power of scale, specialization, and surplus. That's true for societies as a whole, how societies start to evolve in different ways when there's a surplus and when people start to specialize, both in, sort of good ways and bad ways. It's the beginning of, it was the beginning of steel technology, but it's also the beginning of widespread war when we developed agriculture. So know that technology can majorly shake things up in organizations for both bad and good ways, and understand the idea of unexpected consequences. And I don't think anybody, when they were domesticated corn, were sitting there thinking, aha, now we're going to have wealth inequality, right? They were thinking, I want to feed my family. So just understand that tech, whether it's domesticating corn or a new smartphone, can have much bigger effects than we sometimes realize, sometimes very good ones and sometimes very catastrophic ones. And on that note, recognize how small changes can accelerate. Something as simple as an iron plow can revolutionize how things are done, again, for both good and bad ways. And again, on that note of the archaeology lectures as well as the politics lecture, look for flows of informal social power. Think about sort of the ways in which power is not just something formal through laws and police officers, for example, but also the way in which we sort of socialize each other, enculturate each other, sanction each other. Sorry, I was talking to my kiddo. Okay, hold on just a minute. And then point number 8 is, make space for religious diversity, because we were talking about religion and the fact that people don't necessarily have the same worldview. And that doesn't mean we can't get along, but you do need to understand other worldviews and be able to understand how intelligent people might believe in that worldview, much like the Azande reading. Frame well, understand that framing is a thing, understand that most of the time when you're reading somebody's communication, they're very often using framing, back to our linguistics lecture, and understand that and realize that that's part of human existence and know how you can use framing in a way that's truthful and also effective. And then number 10, use language to set up or break up hierarchy, kind of like in the Quaker reading. So those are some thoughts. I hope I've sold you on the relevancy of anthropology. I hope this has been a good class for you. Thank you for your time.